Welcome to the Torchbearer series. It is sponsored by the Bond Schoeneck King Women's Initiative. I'm Jennifer Bohl, and I'm the chair of Bond's Women's Initiative. The Women's Initiative promotes the professional development of women attorneys here at Bond, as well as professionals in our community through sponsoring educational and social programs, both internally and externally. So I want to pass it off to our diversity director, Kim Wolf-Price, and she's going to tell you a little bit more about the Torchbearer program we're having today. Thank you for coming.
Thanks, Jen. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us. As Jen said, my name is Kim Wolf-Price, and I'm the Attorney Professional Development and Diversity Officer here at Bond Schoeneck King. If you joined us for the inaugural Torchbearer Spotlight recently, you know the program came about from discussions, camaraderie, and work of the Women's Initiative Committee, as Jen mentioned. We're still in a time of firsts for women in leadership roles in education and government, and the group recognized the significant contributions of the women here at Bond Schoeneck King, and it felt it was time to shine a light on the women attorneys here. The spotlight focuses on women attorneys who are formerly or currently at Bond in all stages of their careers, and this Torchbearer Spotlight showcases the many ways that Bond women lead and inspire others in law practice, private life, community, and civic service, as well as educational experiences. These spotlights are a dialogue between colleagues, with the interviews being conducted by a fellow attorney. And you are invited into this conversation by joining us. It's a way for us all to learn more about the varied paths women attorneys take to the law and the ways in which they contribute to our profession and beyond. Bond women do light the way, and we want to applaud and honor those efforts so you can get to know them and they can inspire others as they inspire us. Today's spotlight is Mara Afzali, an associate in Bond's Albany office, who has an interesting and inspiring career path, and I'm excited to learn more about her today. It's my pleasure to now turn this conversation over to Sharon Porcelio, a member in our Buffalo office, who's an accomplished litigator and active community member with a fascinating career of her own. And I have to say, someone who I often look up to. So I'd like to turn it over to Sharon now to lead our conversation today.
Thank you so much, Kim and Jen. I'm so happy to be sharing Mara's story with you today, or should I say Captain Afzali, which is where I want to start out, thanking Mara for her service. As if being a busy litigator at Bond and doing all the other activities you'll hear about weren't enough for her, Mara decided to answer the need for more attorneys, particularly women, to serve and join the Army JAG Corps. She was in her initial training as COVID was escalating. We were all gearing up here. She was down there training, and she recently performed her annual training and recently returned to Bond. So welcome back, Mara. Thank you so much for serving. I think this is really a good place for you to begin your story, to tell us about that decision and how that not typical career move fits in with your life plan and impacts your life as a litigator at Bond. So welcome. Thanks for your service, Mara, and welcome back.
Thanks, Sharon, and thanks to Kim and Jen and the rest of the Bond Women's Initiative for having me as part of this Torchbearer series. So, Sharon, I think if anything is typical for me, it would maybe be having a non-traditional career path. So I think joining the Army Reserves at 40 isn't maybe that out of character for me. And so while I did eventually sort of fall into a more traditional path into the legal profession, it didn't sort of follow a straightforward route to get here. And so I'll just kind of give you an overview of that. So the first time I went to college was right out of high school. And I went to study modern dance and creative writing. I was on the campus of an art school that was converted from an old farmhouse in rural Vermont. Marlborough College, for anyone familiar with that. I was only there for a short time, though, before I decided to go travel. I traveled back and forth across the country in an old beat-up Subaru, got to see a lot of our national parks in the country. And soon after that, I got married. I had 4 kids pretty back-to-back, started teaching preschool and yoga, and trained and performed as a circus aerialist. doing aerial silks. So that was sort of gets you through my 20s. And then it was sort of after all of that, that my youngest daughter, who's now 15, started in kindergarten. And I decided to go back and finish my degree, which was something I always wanted to do, and to pursue a law degree. So, and then as you most recently, as you noted, I joined the Army Reserves as a judge advocate. So it kind of brings us to today.
Well, so tell us about that. How did you make that decision to join the Army, and how do you think that fits in with your legal and litigation career?
So I think for as to the decision, I do have military on both sides of my family. Both my grandfathers served. My uncle died in World War II. Sorry, not my uncle, my grandfather's brother. So my great uncle. But I had never really thought about it for myself necessarily. My husband, Javid, on the other hand, was something he always wanted to do. But again, we had 4 little kids and it never quite fit in. But he ended up going back and completing his training to become a JAG officer in 2017. And I think most people familiar with military life know that it's kind of a family affair. So as he started getting, into his unit, I attended a lot of events there and had the opportunity to meet and talk to a lot of the other judge advocates in his unit. And was just sort of fascinated by the stories and sort of what brought each of those people to, just lawyers like you and I working in their civilian careers and who decided for various reasons to kind of use their free time to, take those legal skills that they had and serve our country. So, and I saw that there was a need for more lawyers to sign up to do that, especially women, as you noted. Judge advocates, handle a lot of the sexual assault cases. They act in the role of what the military calls a special victims counsel and support soldiers who file complaints. And obviously, there's been a lot in the media lately about just, what a big need that is and really important work that needed to be done. And then I would also say that, another thing that I wasn't really aware of was that the reserve JAG officers make up nearly half of the judge advocate corps of the Army, right? So the active duty component really relies, on the reservists to bring our sort of civilian skills and to support the Army, the greater Army, right? And so as I started to learn about that, and for me, I was someone who was always raised with a sort of core value of, if you see there's a need and you want to, help your community, then you should do it. And so I saw that need and I put in my application.
Well, you mentioned that some of these reservists use their free time to volunteer. Now, I doubt that you have much free time, but it sounds like you found a way to turn whatever free time you have into not only something of value to the military and the folks you're helping, but perhaps into an experience that will help you as a litigator. Why don't you tell us about that? What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I think that's right. So I think, what I've really found is that the work I do as a judge advocate and the work I do as a litigator here at Bond really kind of, support one another. So at Bond, right, I'm in our litigation department. I get to work on all kinds of complex commercial cases and employment litigation matters. And those, I kind of have given me the opportunity to jump in and learn the skills of litigation from evaluating risk and interacting and strategizing with our clients and with the other attorneys to drafting motions and getting into court. And so those sort of quintessential litigation skills. And then as a judge advocate, it's a little bit more of that personal one-on-one level assignments. So providing legal assistance to individual soldiers, helping them draft estate planning documents before they deploy, or acting as a victim advocate, or assisting in a variety of different matters. But and then also I've been in the role in my unit of acting as our master resilience trainer. So I went to a special training through the Army. We learn the skills to then take back to our units and then present and teach skills that promote soldier well-being and kind of offer those resources to our units. So in that way, I think, they're very different skills, but also I can bring those litigation skills that I have into my role as a judge advocate. There's actually not as many Army reservists that are in private practice. And so those can be really useful skills. And then I can bring the perspective I get from working with the soldiers one-on-one and my familiarity with military law back into my role here at Bond. And one more thing I would note is just that as a litigator in private practice, I think people, it's pretty commonly known that it can be, with the court backups and whatnot, it can be hard for attorneys, at least especially, at the associate level, to find those opportunities to be able to conduct trials or hearings. And so the Army kind of gives me that additional avenue through which to gain that meaningful experience and to grow as an attorney.
Yeah, that is fantastic, because you're right. It's very difficult for more junior lawyers to get that kind of experience. And you have found a way to get that experience that, most of those junior litigators crave. And how did you have that motivation and that drive to do that?
I guess, so for motivation, I think that comes from a few places. And I think that kind of brings us to my first torchbearer, or here it's my torchbearers, my parents. So my parents are both sort of innately sort of those really giving people involved in the community, always trying to go out of their way to help people. And they also, I was raised in, they raised me in this sort of tight knit, intentional religious community. And that sort of had a fundamental impact on the way that my worldview was formed. So everything kind of came from family first, then out to your community. I went to all the schools that I was raised in were within my community, and then sort of move outwards right from there. And so some of those core beliefs that, lead me to be motivated in that way kind of come from, I think, when I reflect back on some of those core values or teachings I got in that setting, one of which being that the idea of, loving your neighbor or caring for someone in our communities is really meaningless unless you put that into action, right? So usefulness and service to others and being active in that role was something that was taught and promoted. And then also this sort of fundamental idea that it's each of our responsibility to constantly be looking within and reevaluating as to how we're acting as our best selves, and to push from within to kind of reach your next level of potential in order to, again, move outwards to make the world a better place. And so I think that being sort of this constant process are the things that my parents, right, and the community that they raised me in kind of gave me that motivation to want to, use those skills and get involved in lots of different things.
So that was great. They provided you with the motivation, that desire. So a lot of people have motivation and desire, but then they don't, need the drive to follow through and achieve, what you want, what you were motivated to achieve. So how do you think, what drove you to accomplish that, to, reach for those goals?
Yeah, I think I like that, the splitting up of the motivation and the drive, because I do think that drive is a little bit different from you. And I reflect on that. I think, my parents, they're both sort of nonconformists at heart, particularly my father. And it wasn't, they never really expressed to me that they had specific expectations for a particular path that they wanted me to take in life, right? So they taught me, more importantly, to kind of think for myself and to not do something just because they or anyone else thought it would be right for me. And so they really encouraged my siblings and I to pursue our lives on our own terms. And I feel like they've always, as I've made choices, whether or not they could kind of see the end game in those choices, they've really respected and supported the decisions I've made in my life. And so I think that the way that they evaluated success sort of came more in terms of whether or not I was a good person, or whether or not I was, doing those things that I was motivated to do and inspired me, rather than by sort of more outward measures of success. And so I think of one example. When I was in law school, my dad used to kind of tease me about how much I cared about my class rankings when they would come out. And he was really proud of me, right? But he just wasn't something that felt terribly impressive for him. And he would kind of laugh about that. So, it just wasn't the way he measured success. But so I think that when I think of drive, right? So I think part of it is maybe just as kids, right, we try to identify in contrast to our parents in some ways. And I think that in some ways, that happened with them. But then also I reflected, my mom was in her own way, this just sort of the kind of person who never sat down. She's always doing stuff. She just has this internal drive to keep going and is always doing something. And so I think part of that came from her as a role model. And then, also my husband Javid and I got married when we were really young. And so we got together when we were 16 and 18. And so anyone who knows me and thinks I'm a driven person, if they don't know my husband, being around him makes me feel lazy some of the time. So he's like incredibly driven person. And I think in many ways, we just started pushing one another as much as we would push ourselves to kind of, shoot for the next thing. And what could we achieve if we tried? And so I think that's just both kind of innately how we both are in some ways. And so I think that definitely kind of is where I get some of that drive as well.
Well, that drive and motivation are sort of traditional litigators' traits, if you will, but that giving, caring, all of those other fantastic traits you described aren't often thought of as traditional traits of a litigator. So how do you think you were able to bring all of that together as a litigator?
Yeah, it was a little bit challenging, I think, for me, at least at first. So I think a lot of that came from mentorship. So I don't have a lot of lawyers that I had as examples in my family growing up. And, I think like many of us, when you first go back to law school, you kind of have that imposter syndrome, right? You sort of feel like, I think everyone feels a little bit like a fish out of water in law school. But for me, when I went back to finish my undergraduate degree before I went to law school, right, I'd been teaching preschool and yoga, right? And I hadn't been in school for a while. And so mentorship and having role models was a really big part of that for me, and being able to kind of pull those things together and sort of reconnect with some of those skills that I would need to kind of get through law school. And so I think that, a great example would be sort of another one of my torchbearers, which is Judge May D'Agostino, who's a district court judge in the Northern District of New York. And I was incredibly fortunate to get to be a judicial intern for her, not once, but actually twice during law school. So once was right after my first year. And so I immediately, right, she's just, anyone that knows her, she's an incredibly, caring and connecting person in that way. She is a natural teacher and mentor. And, I really connected with that. She also has a very deep love of the law and was able to kind of connect with me in that way, and an amazing sense of humor. So really connected with her. But she, at the same time, is someone who took a totally different path to the law, right? So she kind of, by the time there I am as a 37-year-old interning for her with 4 kids, trying to juggle everything. And she, by the time she was that age, she was, well known as sort of a legendary trial attorney in the area, and had been paving the way for women in litigation and on the bench right now. So, and she's also just has this way about her. She's incredibly measured and detail oriented. She is like over prepared for everything. And while it was a little bit intimidating to work with her at first, I think also it really gave me this model of what I could strive to be. And maybe even more importantly, I think she, for reasons that I still maybe can't quite figure out, had this confidence in my potential as a lawyer and my ability to succeed in ways that I didn't always feel as certain about. Again, like I mentioned, I kind of felt 37 at the time, feeling a little late to the game at starting my legal career and trying to catch up. But whereas that could feel like a challenge, she really saw that as such a benefit. And she would consistently comment on how that really gave me a perspective and be able to bring my life experiences as sort of like an asset to my ability to understand or look at a complex legal issue. And maybe even more importantly, my ability to connect with people and the attorneys I work with or the clients that I have. And I loved that perspective that she kind of saw. And I think her belief in me and her as a role model also solidified my interest in litigation in particular. And so to this day, I think she's still someone I look to as an example of the kind of attorney or litigator that I strive to be. And sometimes I think it takes someone seeing something in you that is there, but maybe you're not as familiar with, to kind of help pull those things together. And so I think for me, seeing examples of other people was part of what helped me bring those things together.
That's great. Yeah, she is a fantastic role model and was quite an accomplished litigator, as you mentioned, and that sounds like quite an experience. So obviously that was kind of you were still at the beginning of your journey there. So where are you in your journey as to be a famous litigator and attorney now? Where do you see yourself? How's that going?
I definitely don't think famous and anywhere close to being a famous litigator, anywhere like Judge D'Agostino at this point. But I am, a couple years into practice now, starting out as sort of getting to my mid-level associate years, starting to feel more, a lot more comfortable in my role here at Bond, and feel certainly more comfortable in knowing about what kind of litigator or attorney I want to be, and who I try to, what I try to embody when I approach my work. So I think, another example, I think, where I can think of a torchbearer who kind of helped me out along my way of transitioning from law school and finishing up my degrees and getting here into private practice. I think I've been incredibly fortunate. Our little Albany litigation group here has just been a great fit for me in terms of, we all just work very well together and are very supportive of one another and collaborate well together. But when I first started here, Art Siegel, who was one of our longtime litigators here in Albany, and then moved on to the role of our general counsel for a year before he recently retired. So his office was right next to mine. And, I start out, I'm in litigation. And right as he was sort of making that transition into his role as general counsel, he was kind of working on his one last big case. And he brought me in on which was my first big case that I worked on. And it was an appeal that we were preparing in the Second Circuit. And getting the opportunity to work with Art when he was sort of at that point where he could give this additional time, he was very generous with his time and mentorship as we went through that case. And it made me realize, right, here's another example of someone who incredibly successful in the litigation world. But he had some of those similar traits that I really could identify with, right? He's very kind person, very generous, very empathetic. He's, outside of his life here as a litigator, he's also an artist of sorts and, very family oriented. And actually one fun fact about Art and I that we connected on is that he and his wife, as Javid and I were volunteer firefighters together. And so we had these sort of things in common that we connected with as we got to spend some time together. And, I think, again, seeing how he used those traits, not even, to his advantage, I would say, right? So to his advantage to be able to get excellent outcomes for his clients, made me realize that it wasn't something that was something I would have to, I can zealously represent and advocate for clients while still using those skills to get the best outcome in the most efficient way without, getting your ego in the way and whatnot, which I think sometimes can happen in the litigation world. So, I think that for me, I guess it would just continue on in finding those examples and those role models and working with the people around me to kind of just get more comfortable in my role here as a litigator at Bond.
First of all, thank you. I didn't know that about Art and his wife. So now I'm even learning more facts about my former colleague. So thank you for that. But with all that you've mentioned, I'm sure that you're well on your way to being a great and famous litigator in the future. And with all of that, I'm sure you've made all of the torchbearers you've mentioned very proud, whatever their role was in your, getting to where you are now and where you will get to be. So what's interesting about that is you mentioned that you were late to the game. I think that's a really interesting perspective you bring because you entered the legal field later in life. Tell us what that has meant to your career. How do you view, the goods and the bads of that particular aspect or piece of your background?
Well, I think, obviously it can be a challenge in that, now that I am in the legal profession and I'm, it can be hard to feel like this whole decade or two of time where people your age have been practicing, where I was doing other things. I was raising my kids and, performing in the circus arts and teaching yoga and all kinds of different things. So those years, though, I really cherish and value. And so on the other hand, I think it gives me the ability to not feel, I feel still a lot of, excitement about being in this career. And so it's still new to me in ways that it might not be if I had started earlier. And, my kids now are 15, 17, 19, and my oldest just turned 22. And so I had them all when I was very young. And one benefit that I think now that I'm practicing is that I see, the difficult decisions people have to make around when to take time off to have their kids, or who's going to take the focus away from their career for that period of time. And for us, for Javid and I, it all happened really naturally because our kids were all older by the time we both went back to school. So it's made it a lot easier in terms of balancing out, once I started my career, I just kind of dove in, and it's more about making sure I'm keeping those things balanced, right? Rather than how I can take that time off. And I think that that's been really a real benefit that, maybe I didn't see coming, but it's been really great.
So what about other work-life balance, well-being? How does that all play into your current role?
Yeah, so I think, at least at first when I would hear the term work-life balance, I think some people, when you hear it, you think about how much time am I at work versus how much time am I at home, right? Sort of a time in the office, out of the office, and making sure you're doing enough of both. But I think generally people are starting to look at it in a more complex way. And I think for me, I think it's more about kind of taking the time on a sort of regular enough basis to be evaluating, kind of doing a gut check, right? How is my internal equilibrium, right? So I think of the balance more internally than I do necessarily externally. So it's not just between work and life as these two separate things, but rather work and time with my kids, time with friends, my physical health and exercise, time for, being quiet and just being out in nature. I live out in the country, so I love being out in nature. And so it's sort of that mental, physical, emotional balance, right? And I think that requires, like I said, sort of that constant reevaluation, because it changes based on external pressures, like what areas of my life are sort of imposing the most external pressures on me, some that I can control and some that I can't. And what areas of my life, right, sort of need me most at that time. And I think, we talked earlier about how I had the opportunity to do the training through the Army with the Master Resilience training. And so one thing I love that I think I hadn't really thought about as much until I learned through one of the skills in that program, which is, and it really resonates with me on this point, is that when we can identify and operate in our life using our more innate character strengths or core values, we can kind of be at our best and operate at our best. And not only, right, does that not, more fulfilling fundamentally, but also it allows us to act more effectively and efficiently. So the question that program kind of has you ask yourself is, does what I'm doing, does this activity sort of primarily energize or exhaust me when I approach it? Does interacting with other people or whatever that thing is sort of primarily energize or exhaust me? And that kind of now goes into part of my gut check process. Because obviously nothing is always, going to be only energizing, right? Everything we do that's sort of, put hard work into is going to feel exhausting at times. But at its core, we should feel kind of like there's a sense of what we give our limited time to and how it energizes us. And then also, I think what's really key about that is being aware that when we're being asked to do something or required to do something, either in our personal life or in work, that is just maybe outside of our sort of more fundamental character strengths, it's going to naturally require us to draw on skills that sort of are more exhausting to us. So maybe just having that awareness that, hey, this is a little outside my comfort zone, it's going to deplete me a little bit differently, right? And so just being aware of those things, I think that's sort of my approach to evaluating my work-life balance, is just trying to stay in touch with that.
I think the firm's going to be adding you to our wellness committee now. Maybe you can give that MRT training to the office. You know,
Yeah.
it sounds like something we could all benefit from. So maybe
really
that's something else you can bring back to the firm.
Yes.
So, but how do you think that you use your particular character strengths to maintain that balance?
Well, so as part of the program, we actually did our own, it was actually quite a long survey of identifying your core character strengths. And I think, not surprisingly, based on what we've discussed, some of mine that came up were, my top one was having a sense of purpose and faith, which I think makes sense based on my background. And then also my other top ones were having a curiosity in the world, having honesty, authenticity, and genuineness, and hope and optimism. And so those were my big ones that came out of that survey. And so I think for me that explains why those are the things that energize me, being involved in a lot of stuff, and why I've taken so many diverse paths. So each of those things that I went after was because it inspired and kind of tapped into those strengths. And so you have that innate curiosity. So for me, that's not only just of the external world, right? When I was driving across the country, kind of exploring things with my friends, or taking my, kids when I worked with them out on explorations around the neighborhood or to different areas, but also sort of an internal curiosity about what I might be capable of if I work hard and don't sort of let the fears and self-doubts that I have control or get in the way. And so kind of picking something, and it's almost like the more outside of my comfort zone it is, sometimes the more interesting it is to me, because I feel like if I put my energy towards that, I kind of, learn so much about myself in the process. And so, what's my personal capacity? It expands when I try those things, when I learn those things about myself. Where are my weaknesses? How are they holding me back? And so when I do that for myself, it not only makes me a better person, right, but also then I can better, be a better person and better serve those, and love the people around me and my family, right, and support my community more effectively, both again in work and outside of work. So I think, the other thing I think sometimes is it's just like, life's kind of short. We only have so many opportunities we can take advantage of, and I kind of just feel like I want to get the most of them in that I can. So, I think that's how those character strengths that I have kind of make sense in the context of my life.
Well, it certainly has been interesting to date, and I'm sure there's more to come. So how do you know, what is your next adventure going to be?
Yeah, so I think the first thing that I think of is my commander when I was down in my initial training, had a great sort of, an army saying that she gave us as our class, which was saw the wood in front of you. So whatever the task is that you have at hand, just give it your best. Saw it, do your best at what's put in front of you. And I think for me, that's always kind of what I try to focus on, is doing my best at what's in front of me. And so for me right now, that's being a litigator, right? My work with the Army, being, with my family and all the things that I enjoy. And so I would say also, as a litigator, one way that I find that sort of adventure is each case that I work on, or the curiosity is, I have to learn all about a new world, right? To effectively represent my clients, I need to dive in and I need to learn about what that company is like, everything about that company or that industry, right? We learn so much about a particular industry. And so, really getting to know that story is how I can best then take that and represent that client's interest. So that's some way that curiosity continues to be kind of play out in my life. But at the same time, I think when it comes to sort of the bigger sort of adventure or what's next kind of questions, I've never felt like I sort of sought out or planned my life experiences in other than when I decided to go back to law school. I think a lot of the things that I did were sort of what was right in front of me. And I saw it as a possibility and decided to go for it rather than to seek it out. And I'm kind of someone who believes in things falling into place. When something's right, it'll fall into place. And so an example of that would be the Army. That wasn't something on my radar even just a few years ago, but I remember the commander of my husband's unit at the time said, hey, we were talking about it. And he said, hey, you never know, throw your application in and see what happens. You're almost 40, in the Army, that's significant. So throw it in. And I did. And then, the ball started rolling. And the next thing you know, I'm down at Army basic training at 40, being put through the rigors and during a pandemic. So, it felt both like something I was choosing, but also, something bigger than, what I have as my life plan, if, for whatever that means.
Well, you certainly have a lot of balls in the air all at one time. How do you keep them all up in the air?
I think really it comes back down to, and it's a constant work in progress because like everyone, I struggle with it sometimes, but doing those gut checks, trying to keep everything in balance, and obviously support of friends, family, my colleagues here at the firm. I think, and I think also it's important to recognize the support where you have it. So my mom lives with me, and I couldn't do what I do without her, kind of picking up the slack with the kids, dropping the kids off when they forget to get a ride or forget something at school. And so she's sort of continues to be my support, and she's great. So, I think that trying to keep things together with myself, keep that balance, and then just having that support network.
Well, in your short 42 years, you certainly had a lot more going on than many of us. And, with looking back, if you will, at this young age, is there anything you would change?
I mean, I think most of us, if we think back, you can start to identify things where you maybe wouldn't have done in hindsight or would have done in hindsight. But I prefer the way of looking at it where I love my life and how it is right now. So I'm blessed with amazing opportunities and experiences that I've had. I'm married to my best friend. I've got 4 amazing kids that, keep me laughing and keep me on my feet every day. It's a lot to be grateful for. And so I think that when I think of it that way, my life experiences and the sort of meandering path I took to get where I am today is what landed me here. And so I think despite that temptation to go back and, tweak things, I take the view of I'm happy where I am, so I wouldn't go back and do anything differently.
All right. Well, since this is a Torchbearer series, I understand that you're a legend at Albany Law School. So what does that mean to you, and how do you plan to live up to that legend?
Well, I think that probably, again, is a little bit of a generous and maybe unwarranted description, but I think mostly people remember me at the law school, maybe first of all, because I sort of do have a big personality. I'm kind of, maybe that's a nice way of saying I'm sort of loud and talk a lot to people, but probably also because I do love going back to the law school. I love getting involved, whether it's judging moot court competitions or just going to different events and connecting with the students who are there now. So I know for me, again, I benefited personally a lot from that. I looked a lot to the mentors and from the alumni and, upperclassmen and the professors. And so I love being able to go back and give back and sort of pay that forward to the students there now. And I think also it comes down to, I think we all appreciate, authenticity and connecting with people. And for whatever reason, I feel very comfortable being vulnerable or sharing my story or pieces of that if it means that it can make someone else feel like they can, if they want to be where I am, if they want to be litigating or they want to join the reserves and be a JAG officer or whatever it is, if me sharing my story and saying, hey, you don't feel like you have it all together today, you don't feel like, that you can do it. So I feel that way all the time. So that's not, again, I think back to something Art told me when we were going into, some of the, oral arguments and, prepping for different things and talking about mentorship and being a litigator. And he said, having those nerves and having that feeling when you go to do something, like that just means you care about what you're doing. It doesn't mean you're not cut out for it. And so I think that's true about, a lot of things, is just, being able to connect with people and say, hey, you've got this, like, work hard. You're going to have to put the work in. It's not going to just come to you, but work hard and stay focused and believe in yourself. That's your best shot at succeeding. So I think people appreciate my willingness to come back and share that. And so for me, it means taking the responsibility, I think, to feel that I'm uplifting those that are coming after me, right, in a serious and meaningful way, in the same way that my torchbearers have for me. And that's also very much in line with the Army leadership values that we're taught. So lead by example, be available to help those around you. That's something I learned both from my colleagues here at Bond, from my mentors, and through my work with the Army. So I think, if anything, that is sort of the takeaway that I have.
Well, great. Thank you very much, Mara, certainly for your service. And I think you're well on your way to being a torchbearer, probably already are and have been for many others in various lines and various roles that you've had, but certainly with your colleagues at Bond and in the military. And we're thrilled to have you with us. And thank you for your service, both to Bond and to the military. So
Thank you.
Thank you. And we want to thank all of you for joining us today, and want you to keep an eye out for the next in our Torchbearer series, which Kim and Jen will surely alert all of you to in the near future. So thank you for joining us today, and have a great day. Take care.